Welcome everybody. Props in the Spotlight. Brother Dan Goodwin here, your host. I have my book, The Great End Time Distraction, here. I think you can see that okay. If you don't have this book, this is a very important book for this day that we live in. People are confused about a lot of things. The Nephilim, the return of the Nephilim, the Genesis 6 event, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and the claim is made that those are fallen angels that intermarried with human women, had children. All that is physically, biblically, and humanly impossible. It did not happen. And today, I want to read you something out of the book. This is a little chapter called "In the Beginning," and I have Doc sitting here. We're gonna share some important things with you today about the gap theory. I have a little section. I'm just going to read one paragraph, and then we're going to bring Doc in. I got here, it's called "In the Beginning," and in parentheses, the gap theory. The gap theory. We're going to help you with that today. They all start in Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2 with the gap theory. In other words, the Nephilim crowd, the fallen angel crowd, the gap theory is very important to them for what they teach. And most of the Nephilim proponents believe in the gap theory. They believe God created a world in verse 1 that was filled with men without souls. Do you believe that? Have you ever heard that? You ever read that in the Bible? These men became corrupted with the fallen angels over a process of millions of years. Have you ever read that in the Bible? Where are they getting this stuff? We're going to ask Doc in just a minute. He was alive back then. He's going to tell us what happened. They teach this gap in time is in between verse 1 and 2, and Doc's going to read that verse to us in just a second, and that God remade the old earth with the creation story beginning in verse 2 of Genesis 1. This theory of a gap is important to the Nephilim crowd to explain their Genesis 6, I call it sci-fi, but controversy is what I wrote here. I do not believe the Bible teaches a gap of any sort, and we're going to bring Doc in, and we've got a DVD that he did. I'll show it to you right there, but she'll put it up on the screen in a little while. The gap theory, fact or fiction. We're going to discuss that and much more today, as well as another show in the near future where we'll do a part 2 of this. I think it's important in this day that we live in to understand some of these theories out there and understand what's true and what isn't true. Okay? So fasten your seat belts, get some popcorn, get you a cup of coffee or whatever you need, and stand by. And welcome everybody. Props in the Spotlight here. I am your host, Brother Dan Goodwin. Sitting with me, Dr. Charles Hiltibidal, who's got a DVD here that we're going to discuss today in the program, as well as a little bit from my book, The Great End Time Distraction. And as we go, she'll put some of those pictures up for you. So, Doc, let's start with the verse, Genesis 1. Why don't you read that for us, and let's get started.
Well, the Bible is very clear. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth."
All right, well, there's the gap theory, right?
Well, I guess, because it says in verse 2, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters."
All right, so the first thing I have written down to ask you, Doc, is this. What is the definition of this gap theory? Maybe there's somebody listening, they never heard this before.
Sure.
What is the gap theory?
Well, there are folks that believe that there's a gap of time between verse 1 and verse 2. And
I mean, a minute or an hour? I mean, what kind of gap?
I asked the folks that believe in it, how long is that gap? Because if you're going to be honest, then you got to let the evolutionists have their 6 or 8 or 10 billion years. And really the word "and" in verse number 2 ought to be all that you need to understand it, even from the English.
Yep.
But the word that is used here in verse 2 is a coupletive. In other words, it's adding the information in verse number 2 to what God done on day number 1. It has nothing to do with the gap of time.
Okay, so the gap theory, what you're saying is the theory, and it's a theory.
And it's a theory.
But for some of these guys, I don't think it's a theory.
Well, to some they think it's a fact, but it is not but a theory.
So the theory is that there's a gap of time. It could be 1,000,000 years, it could be 10 million, it could be 1,000,000,000, depending on who you talk to.
True.
And depending on what bone they found out in the hillside and how old they say it is.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories. I don't know if they're true or not. I've heard that people have buried a dog or something, and a few years later they dug up the bone, took it to a laboratory,
all kinds of things.
and
Some
they said
of
it
them
was prehistoric.
Some of those are hoaxes, and then some of them are real facts, because the carbon-14 dating thing is not an accurate measurement by any means.
Yeah.
We could discuss that another time on science, but
so the
for now,
term
it's not
prehistoric isn't biblical either.
No.
Is it? Prehistoric means before history.
Before history.
How can there be anything
history
before
didn't
history?
start until verse number 1,
Yeah.
when it comes to the era of time in which we are now living.
Okay, so that's what the gap theory is, and it's a theory, and I don't believe it's a biblical theory at all.
No.
I think God would have told us more about this.
Well, grammar, even in the English, ties the two verses together. It has nothing to do with any gap between the two. The word "and" is just telling you the condition of which God brought into existence in verse number 1. That's just that simple.
Well, let me ask you this, verse 2, and the earth was without form and void. That seems to be a big part of their theory here.
Yes,
what does
but
that
they
mean
got to look
you?
at the rest. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep, and God moved upon the face of what?
The waters.
Oh. See, on day number 1, God brought into existence the word created in verse number 1, and I cover this in the DVD. Matter of fact, it's a 2 DVD set, and the second DVD is about 48 minutes long, and it's all about an understanding of verse number 1 of your Bible. But the word created there is the word bara. There are 2 Hebrew words that are used either for made or created. The word bara means to, there's a slide in there, Miss Goodwin, somewhere that shows that. Bara is meaning to bring into existence something that never existed before. Asaya is the other word, and it means to be made. They're used interchangeably because when you get to the 4th day or the 4th commandment, it talks about how that God created. And the word there is Asa, and here in Genesis chapter 1, it's bara. In essence, before time began. That's what begins here on day number 1, in the beginning. That's time. God what? Brought into existence something that had never existed before. We call it hydrogen and oxygen. The combination is water. What is water if it doesn't have something to house it or form it? It's without form and void. There is no gap between verse 1 and verse 2. Period.
Okay, so that leads me to this, Doc. Doesn't a gap in time, or gap theory as they call it, doesn't it cause sin to begin before Adam?
Yeah. Well, my Bible says Adam, because of one man's sin, all have become sinners. We're all sinners because of Grandpa Adam's sin.
Yeah.
Well, if there was a supposedly pre-existing world, as you said a while ago, some believe there were soulless people. Well, if they were soulless, how would sin involve? But anyway, that would put sin before creation.
And what's the purpose of all that? I mean,
their purpose is today. They're holding to the gap theory is because without a gap theory, I have no way to convince you that there were fallen angel activity in Genesis chapter 6.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't convince you that there were fallen angel activity in Genesis chapter 6, I won't be able to convince you that as the days of Noah means there's going to be a return to fallen angel activity.
Wow.
None of that is real because there is no gap theory. There is no gap in time.
Now you mentioned the first man to sin. Romans 5:12 is very plain.
That's right.
As by one man, that's talking about Adam, sin, and I realize Eve sinned as well.
Yeah.
But sin is transferred by the bloodline of the man.
Eve's sin was a deception. Adam's sin was willful.
Yeah.
And so therefore it was a transgression.
And the bloodline is how it's transferred. Right. So when Adam had his first child had was tainted
born a
blood.
Sinner.
Yeah. And
yes.
So
and we're all born a sinner because the seed line of sin is passed from the seed of the father to the child.
So Romans 5:12 is by one man sin entered into the world.
Yes.
Now that's pretty plain.
Right.
If there's a gap and there was sin before that and people before that, that doesn't fit properly.
That's
that
one
would
of the
be
things,
deceiving.
I've got a slide. I don't know if she can find it there, of the 7 things that I discuss about the gap theory. But in those 7 things, these are the things that they believe that I counter and show that is not true. I mean, one of them is the issue we're talking about.
So we'll leave that up
they're
for
trying
a
to
couple
explain
minutes there
away.
for them.
One of the things is they're trying to blend together evolution and the Bible, yet they take a stand. They don't believe in the evolution, yet they are accommodating it. You can't have both at the same time, Doc.
And that's one of my questions I was going to ask you. Aren't they just trying to find a way for evolution, because they have bought into this million-year-old skeletons?
Some of them may have. There are good people on both sides of this, so we want to make sure people understand. There are good people that I think are misled here. But most people have never studied it out and do not realize where the gap theory got its foundation. If you study early church writers, you're not going to find it in the early church writers.
Now, when you say the early church, how far back?
First, second, and third century.
Tertullian and all those guys.
Yeah, all the way back. You're not going to find them discussing it. You're not going to find it in the Gospels or discussing it anywhere. None of the epistles deal with it. Even though some people say over in Peter, well, you got to understand in the book of 1 Peter, the context is Noah. So you're looking at the flood of Noah, not another flood. So one of the things is that they want to find a way so desperately to help evolution and the Bible to come together. So at the same time, the King James Bible that we have was being translated, the devil was using another entity in the world of science, and that was Darwinianism. Yeah. Evolution began to catch hold. So what was happening? There's a slide in there of Dr. Chalmers. He and Clarence Larkins were contemporary in their day. So
we're talking late 1800s, early 1900s.
We're in early 1800s.
Okay.
All right, 1700s and 1800s, in this era of time, what's happening is clergy is losing their clout in the field of academia. I mean, for hundreds and centuries of years, a clergy was right up there at the top of academia. Well, all of a sudden, evolution is catching hold, and academia is moving this direction away from looking to the clergy to be an authority. And so Thomas Chalmers is going to help develop an idea of what we call the gap theory today, and trying to find a way to blend old ages or long eras of time with our Bible. Also, you get theistic evolution along this way. God started it, and maybe then evolution carried it out. All kinds of, but it was an attempt to blend academia and the Bible together.
I'm just shocked that people bought into the evolution thing, and right along with that, suddenly this carbon dating. Right. Suddenly, you can't watch a documentary anymore.
No,
National Geographics and all that.
And everything.
A million years ago, this happened.
They've convinced the greater majority of the people through the educational system that it's fact rather than fiction.
They've made you feel like you're not educated.
That's it.
You're nothing.
Oh, that's it.
If you don't believe that millions of years ago this happened,
That's
then
right.
you're looked down upon.
Yeah, you're just. That's what they did, and this is how this come about. I've got a slide in there somewhere showing how that even in Chalmers' day, progressive movement began because they thought they were progressing toward light, as science and the Bible are progressing along together. No, they weren't. Science has always been. True science has always been backed up by the Bible.
Yeah, and of course in this generation, in the last 2 years, science has been destroyed. We're following the science. Well, wait a minute. If the science isn't biblical and isn't true, it's not science at all.
Science doesn't speak.
Yeah.
Science either verifies or unverifies it.
And I believe the CDC has just recently come out and admitted we've been wrong on some things. Yeah, they've been wrong on a lot. Those people dead today.
But the subject matter, I mean, if you study it in the Hebrew, even in the English, there is no gap between verse 1 and verse 2.
Okay, on that note, let's take a little breather here and tell the folks about the need coming up, probably 4 to 6 weeks. We have the bill comes due again.
Here we go again.
And we operate off the gifts of God's people, the viewers, you out there. We have many of you that give on a monthly basis. We have some that give every few months, and we got some that's kind of once a year they give a big amount, and we're glad for all of it.
Somewhere during the quarter they'll give a large gift.
But what we're finding is usually they wait till the last couple of weeks before the bill's due, and all of a sudden
they make us sweat it to the end.
My hair's starting to turn white. Have you noticed? And
it's the more bleach he's using.
Yeah. So, but we really believe that God opened these doors for us. We really believe that God wants us on the air doing what we're doing. And we're not for everybody. But,
if God wasn't in it, how would we be able to add more television programming and everything that we're able to do?
We are on CTN every Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, nationwide on Dish and DirecTV. It's satellite. We're on VTN in Little Rock, Hot Springs, and Memphis, and some of the Missouri area down there on cable. We've been on there, I think, 3 months or 4 months, something like that. And we're on at 2:30 now on Saturday morning. 2:30 Saturday morning. How about 2:30 Saturday afternoon Central Time? But we've got a new one, Doc, that we've only been on several weeks now, PTL. At 8:30 p.m. Sunday nights. We're real excited about that spot. It's a good time.
Is it cable or is it?
It's cable.
It's cable.
And they're in over 9 million cable subscribers have PTL in their listing.
Okay.
That doesn't mean they're all watching, obviously, but in other words, those 9 million people, those homes.
And you're talking to somebody in Minnesota? Or?
In Minnesota, there's something called Cool TV. In fact, by the time this airs, we may be on there. He's wanting to get us on right away. It's called Cool TV.
And there'll be no doubt there's going to be more down
there. And there's more.
But it's going to require more subscribers or more supporters to help us. And I try to tell folks everywhere I go, it's an opportunity to invest material things into eternal investments, and you'll have a reward when you get to heaven.
And we call it becoming a partner.
Yes.
And all you do is go to the website, prophecyinthespotlight.com. You can see it right there on the screen. And there's donate buttons all over the place there. There's a donation package. If you just want to give a little bit, $50 or more, you can get the Michael Smith DVD package there, the forgiveness book there. But if you'd like to give more, you'd like to give on a monthly basis, there's other donate buttons you can use. You can call the 800 number, get a hold of us. We'd love to talk to you. You can email us, whatever you want to do. We would love to talk to you about becoming a partner here. We'd love to tell you our vision, our dream, what we want to do here. It'll scare some of you. I think I scare Doc sometimes what I want to do here, the outreach that I want to get. Brother, I just believe we're at the end of this thing.
Well, I'm convinced we are.
I want to get to every home in America or in the world, if I could,
Yes.
with our message.
And we are, and through the YouTube channel that goes with our Prophecy in the Spotlight, we are able to reach the entire world.
I talked to somebody just the other day, and they didn't know we're on YouTube. I said, "Did you know we're on YouTube?" "No, really?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, yeah, we mention it often."
Yeah, a lot of
I don't
time.
think people think
I was in a
about it.
church 2 weeks ago, and they said, "Oh, we didn't know you had a TV program."
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, all the shows are on TV. In fact, not just TV, but our what we call our updates. So there's two or three shows a week that go on YouTube. If you're watching television, you only get the TV show, but there's more behind the scenes that we're doing here. And well, enough of that. We would love for you to pray about that. Pray about partnering with us and helping us stay on the air and maybe expand. Okay. So, Doc, let's get back to this gap theory stuff. Let me see here. What does the gap theory? This is important. What does the belief or not belief of the gap theory, what does it have to do with prophecy anyway? We're a prophecy program.
I think it has a lot to do with, number one, gap theory is going to throw a monkey wrench, so to speak, into if God is set in time, a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day, then the week of creation and its 7 days, I believe, is a pattern, as you often teach, it's a pattern of a 7,000-year period of time. So first of all, a gap theory is going to alter what God said about a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day.
Yeah.
And so that's going to alter the timing of God. Secondly, as we've already pointed out, a lot of people go to Matthew chapter 24 and say, well, Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. And so they run back over then to Genesis chapter 6 and try to talk about angel activity that's not even in Genesis chapter number 6. And they couldn't do that if they didn't have the gap theory that they had a foundation for. And so it has a lot to do with prophecy, because a lot of what is being talked about in prophecy circles today is all about a fictitious thing that never happened in the past and is not happening now or will happen. And that's the involvement between angels and humanity.
I tell people all the time, and I write about it in my Great Distraction book. In fact, there's whole chapters in here about sons or servants.
Yep.
Angels are not sons.
No.
As many as received him, he gave the power to become the sons of God,
yes,
even them that believe on his name. That's not talking about angels.
Sons of God. But see, Dan, here's the thing. If you use your Bible as a dictionary, it'll explain itself.
Yeah.
But if you want to use something outside of your Bible, instead of letting your Bible be its dictionary, then you're going to come up with the sons of God can mean this or mean that or mean that. The Lord said in Hebrews chapter 1, he said, at any what time have I ever called an angel my son?
And that's a key verse that I bring out.
Yeah.
At any time, when did I ever say that angels are my sons? And they're not.
But anyway, back to your question, it is very important because there are a lot of people that are being misled today with looking at for things that are non-existent now because they were never existing in the past. Why don't the Bible teachers who want to use as the days of Noah, why don't they want to use Luke 17? Because the very next verse says, and also as it was in the days of Lot.
That's right.
What it is, God's using two individuals, Noah and Lot, to demonstrate as the judgment is about to come, you can live one of two ways. You can live like Noah outside, reaching into the world, or you can live like Lot, compromise your Christianity, get involved with the world. One saved his family, the other lost his family.
Yeah.
It hasn't anything to do with fallen angels or all
and when
that.
and we've done some shows on this. We write about it in the book here. As it was in the days of Noah or the days of Lot, nowhere in there does it say anything about fallen angels or Nephilim or UFOs. Or what he says is, and he explains it, as it was in the days of Noah, they were eating and drinking. marrying and giving in marriage.
And he says basically the exact same thing about Noah's world as he does Lot's world.
There's nothing sinful about those things on themselves, but what he's saying is people are unaware. They're living their lives like there's no God, no judgment, no one to answer to. That's what he's saying.
And Noah was living with his responsibility in his mind, and Lot was living with the things of the world.
Yeah.
One saved his family, the other lost his family.
I have a chapter in here about this, where I give every instance in the Bible where the phrase sons plural now, sons of God is mentioned. And it's only 11 times. You know what the first one is? Genesis 6.
Genesis 6.
The law first mentioned.
And when you go to Genesis chapter 6, you do not find the word angel. You do not even find an inference. But I forget, was it 6 or 9 different times? It's man, and it's all about man and man's sin.
The very context is, in those days, men began to multiply. Not angels, men began to multiply.
Folks, I said, if you'll understand this, the last verse of chapter 3 and the first verse of chapter 6 is the narrative. Chapter 4 is an insertion of the line of Seth, or the line of Cain, and chapter 5 is the line of Seth. They are like a parallel inserted between it to know how you got to men where they were in chapter 6.
Yeah, sons of God marrying the daughters of men.
And it's all about man's imagination was evil only continually. Hasn't anything to do with the gap of time or the return of anything.
And we'll deal more with that in the next show, but real quickly, say something about this Luciferian flood. Some of our viewers probably never heard of such a thing.
Well, they believe that when you get to verse number 2, when it says the world was without form and void, and that means that God destroyed the first world, and now it's just a watery grave. And so they say that this gap of time was a destruction of a pre-Adamic world, and as a result, it was a flood. Well, one of the things that I deal with in the DVD is that removes the evidence of Noah's flood. Because the evidence geologically in our world today is of the flood of Noah, which was a worldwide flood.
And another verse that they use, Doc, and we talked about this at breakfast today, that word replenish. I think it's verse 28.
Yes.
Genesis 1:28.
Well,
replenish the earth. See, we've got a misunderstanding that because of the R-E on the top of the beginning of the word, we jump to the conclusion that it means to do again.
But you know, if you go back into the, what was
1828
Webster's Dictionary, and you'll find exactly what replenish means.
And I define that in the book.
And I have it in the DVD.
Replenish means to
fill it up.
To fill up, right. Because of the R-E at the beginning, we jump
to fill it to the full.
We jump to the conclusion it means to do it again. That's not what it means at all.
That's not what it means at all.
And they use that verse. Well, we're out of time, Doc. We didn't get to everything, but we're going to do a second show. It won't air next week, but it'll come up in a couple of weeks. We'll get another show out there, and we'll deal with some more of this, and we'll deal with them Nephilims, and we'll try to get a picture of one. All right, well, thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you next time. Keep your eyes on them skies.